everybody to the Pincushion Party today. And I hope Pincushion Party didn't scare anybody away, or the fact that I was talking about half-inch finished squares. But I think my goal today on 10 Sisters at 2 is to alleviate any fears about piecing with little pieces. And I think that is my goal today. And I might have sewn up all my pin cushions. Is there any that are not sewn? I think they might all be. Oh well, that's okay. Well, I'm going to show you on a large scale. I was having so much fun. Look at our little basket of pin cushions. Nope, that's okay. I meant one that I actually was just ironed on. I got so excited. I was going to have one that was just ironed on to show you, and I think I sewed all of them up. Nope, that's all sewn up too. That's okay. I'll just show you on a larger scale. So, oh my goodness. So welcome everybody, and I am so happy that you are here. And so today, we call it the Pincushion Party, but like I said, we're going to be talking about 1-inch finished and half-inch finished squares. Now, the good news is, if you know anything about our EasyPiecing Grid, we also have 1.5-inch finished and 2-inch finished. I'm actually going to show you a 2-inch finish today, so if this just is not for you, that's okay. But that's kind of why I wanted to start with pin cushions, because they are, you know, pretty, pretty safe, you know, pretty fun, a little easy, little things. If you only make one and go, nah, then, so you won't have wasted 4 hours cutting out like 5 million 1-inch squares like I did the other day. I had a pile of scraps on the floor. It looked like a bird's nest all around me. So, first of all, I want to kind of talk a little bit about the patterns that we're using. And I mean, with the pin cushion, it's just, I want to show you some of these ones that I did. I'm going to show you these. They're just little scrappy little squares now. This is 1-inch finished, and this is half-inch finished. So I've just add a little border around some of these. And then we can get into some little fun, oh my gosh, I had so much fun with these little houses. So a little sawtooth star, you know, little, let me hold it up here so you can you tell that that's a house? And here's the other thing that I got to thinking about as I was playing around with all these fun little pin cushions, is that some of us are little pin cushion people, right? Some of us like a little, I consider this little, I guess we could even have made it smaller. And some of us are bigger pin cushion people. And so, borders, no borders, you can make this as big or small and as intricate as you want. Now what you're hopefully noticing is that we've done some pin cushions that are just squares. Here's another little square, and then we've done some with half square triangles. So much fun. I obviously could not stop making these. So, talking about the patterns that we used. Any traditional quilt block, some of the ones I did, I used our Seven Brothers Block Party book. Now, as you know, let's see, okay, I'm going to show you one here in a second. I'll show you so as you know, when we have the 2 samplers in the book, we give you each individual block, and then we break it down into squares and half square triangles and tell you how many squares, how many half square triangles you need. And so that was super helpful for me because I was having so much fun. So this block, this little pin cushion block, is one of the ones here in the Brothers. And the other place I found fun ideas was in our Around the Block quilts. We have row quilts in this book, and so there were all sorts of fun little blocks. The houses, I got you know, I love houses anyway. And so we did the little houses. Here's just a fun little extended pinwheel. And I'm going to show you, where's my other pinwheel that I did too. Oh, it's a little miniature. Little tiny little pinwheel in this pincushion. And then this one is a little bit bigger. So these are all pinned shut. We're going to talk about sewing these up. Right now they're just all pinned. Thank you, Patrick. We're going to talk about kind of how we put these together. Oh, here's the little pixelated heart. It was just fun. So the pincushions can be, they can be square, they can be rectangle, whatever size. And our other one I'm going to show you is my little sheep. Had so much fun with the sheep. And what's amazing is this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is 8 by 8 squares. And so if we did this out of the 2-inch finished, this would be a 16 by 16 block. And so this is on the 1/2-inch finished. So I'm really not going to go over the construction of the block, only to tell you, will you lend me a pair of scissors, please, Maddie? Only to give you one little tip when piecing with the 1/2-inch finished. You know that when we're piecing, let me show you on this bigger one. When we're piecing on the grid, oh, I'll take those, thank you. With half square triangles, the key for getting those points to meet up is lining up the seam from corner to corner. And so it is the same concept when we're working with half square triangles that are 1-inch half square triangles. And one thing, and I'm going to kind of talk about half square triangles in a little bit, but one thing that I did a lot of is I just went through my orphan half square triangles. I was kind of saying this last time, but I tend to over prep. I always make way more half square triangles, cut out way too many squares. So I have a lot of just random ones. So I was taking, I wonder if you could find me a 2-inch, 2.5-inch finished half square triangle, Maddie. It's gonna maybe be in one of those drawers right there. That's always a very scary prospect, is just send them loose into my sewing stuff because you could get lost forever. Hey, Maddie, it's in right here on this little tub, right there by your feet. Okay. Oh yeah, perfect. And so here's a half square triangle that is 2.5 inches. And so what I was doing was I was just getting my rotary cutter and my ruler because I wanted 1-inch half square triangles. And so I was using 1.5-inch cut half square triangles, 2 and 2.5. Just picking the ones that I want, and I'm going to go on the ruler and just line up the edge of the half square triangle with a 1-inch mark. And I'm just going to make that cut. And then I just turned it this way. And so there was some waste here, but I don't really care. And then I was going to just go ahead and cut myself a little 1-inch solid square. So especially on these scrappy ones, this was so much fun. Now I'm going to go to the other half of this half square triangle and cut at 1 inch. And then trim that, or go and cut the other angle. And it's nice because you can line up the edges, or no, you can line up the printed lines on your ruler to make sure that that angle, or that seam rather, of the half square triangle is going right from corner to corner. And so this, and then here's my other little 1-inch square. So I really didn't waste much of this half square triangle, just a little bit, but I got some little 1-inch half square triangles. To me, it was way easier doing this than trying to like take 2 squares and sew one at a time, this little of a piece. I know there's some piecers out there very experienced with just piecing tiny little pieces, but that's not me. So I just cut down ones that I had, or I would do the technique to make 4 at a time, and it was about a 2-inch. No. Yes. It was about a 2-inch square that maybe a little over 2 inches. I need to measure, I need to remember that. But anyway, I would make 4 at a time sometimes. Our video that we just did last week, I give you the formula, and so go check that video on half square triangles if you want the formula for making them little. And so then I made my little block, and I added kind of a bigger border. I mean, look at that tiny little house. And so I just added a little bit bigger border. I just cut out a bunch of 1.5 or 2 inch strips to add a little border. And then after I got it all sewn up and pressed, then I kind of trimmed it down if I wanted it smaller. And so then how I like to sew these pin cushions together is, here's my finished quilt top. Here's the top of my pin cushion. And then I made a little sandwich. So here's my back. I'm doing just the same fabric as my border. And I'm going to put these right sides together. And then I do one extra little thing for the pin cushions. And this is, now you could just sew this up like a pillow, leaving an opening. But I do one extra thing. I have just this real thin cotton. It's a really little thin fabric that I picked up somewhere. It could be just like a real inexpensive little muslin, any kind of little scrap piece. I like it being white because then if I have a light background, then it kind of gives that a little barrier. And I put that on the very back of the sandwich behind the backing. So I've got my quilt top, I've got my back, right sides together. You see that okay, Maddie? And then I have this extra little layer, and I'm going to show you why I do that. Now, of course, when we can pin this, and this is a pretty little piece, I don't worry too much about pinning all the way around it, but I do put a pin where I want to start sewing and where I want to stop. Now, I know that you would never do this, but I have been known to start and I sew all the way around and I just sew the whole thing up. So whenever I'm sewing anything like a pillow, I always put a pin where I want to start and a pin where I want to stop. The stopping pin is actually the important one. And so then it doesn't need to be a scant 1/4 inch. You can do a nice full 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. The only time you would want to be extra careful is if you are actually sewing right next to your piecing. So like on my little sheep here, I did not add a border, and so I sewed it with a more careful 1/4 inch seam allowance. And so you're going to sew all the way around, and I do a little back stitch, where I began and where I ended, and then we're going to turn it inside out. Now I want to show you just a little trick. I'm going to do this back the wrong way and are you with me? I wish I could hear you, but Maddie tells me you're there, so that's good. Okay, I'm turning this back inside out. So when you turn it right side out, there's a couple little tricks. See, I was having so much fun. I don't have good step-by-steps. All right, so here I sewed it all the way around. I'm going to take my scissors and clip off those corners, just right above the stitching. That's going to help that corner to poke out easier. And then when I turn it inside out, I want the quilt and the backing and this lining and the quilt back are together. That little white lining piece that I put in. And so my trick for turning inside out is I reach in and I grab one of the outer corners, and I grab that corner, and that's what I pull through, right through my little opening, because sometimes these openings are little. And then if I can, oops, here we go, pull that little corner out, and then I kind of work from there. Now the next closest corner to the opening, see, I'm just kind of pushing it this way. That's the next corner that I want to pull through. There we go. And then I go for that next outer corner. And then the last corner that I do is the next corner closest to the opening. Then I love these, like these long cuticle sticks. I find them at the Blue Beauty Supply. And then I'm going to be careful to, let's see, what's the best way for me to do this? Like this? Like that? Can you see that? And I'm going to just carefully work that corner out. And I'm going to carefully push this corner out. And then I have this other little thing that I do where I take a hold of my corner and I just give it a little wiggle. And it just sort of wiggles that fullness out. Just wiggle that.
Make that sound again.
Where I'm a one-time sound effect. So there's my corner. Just give that a little wiggle. And there's my last one. Now you want to be careful not to poke this through your stitching, right? Okay, so now we have this cute little sandwich. Here's my opening. And then I fold my seam allowances down and I take it over to the iron and I give it a pressing. And that's just going to give me a nice little folded edge for where and it just helps because this can get kind of fray, and so I just fold it under, I give it a good pressing. Okay, then, Patrick, can you give me a little sample of those crushed walnut shells? So there's a few different things that you can fill your pincushion with. One of them is just the fluff, right? The polyester. Patrick got me a 14-pound bag. It's basically crushed walnut shells, but it's in the kitty litter section. Sometimes it's in the bird cage section. And and then will you bring me your little funnel that you used too? So now this is where this little lining piece comes in. And so when this is all turned inside out, I do a couple things. I am going to open up the opening between the backing and the lining. So what is open is the backing and that little lining piece. And that is where, here's my little blue funnel.
Your grandson ran away with.
Oh, I think one of them.
I think this one's too small.
Oh, that's perfect though. At least it shows a funnel. So I got this little silicone funnel for my spice jars, and it's awesome, and it has a little bit bigger hole, and my cute little grandson, I think, ran off with it. This is the funnel that I pour water into my iron with, but you'll get the idea. So I am opening up between my backing and that lining piece, and I do the funnel, and Patrick actually did it. He filled all of these. And then you just take a little something or other, and you're going to pour in cracked walnut shells. Another really great fill for the pincushions is silica sand. It's a white sand, but I think they come in like a 10-pound bag. So when I say Pincushion Party, it means the supplies you buy, you need to have a party because you're going to have enough for everybody to have pincushions. Oh, this is my little silicone one. Oh, we washed it. So it's got a nice big hole, and so this is what we used. Okay, so we're putting the silica sand or the crushed walnuts into the space that's between that lining and the backing. And I had him fill these up, about an inch from the top with this nice, and the thing that is so great about the crushed walnut shells and the silica sand is they're heavy. And so it's going to give your pincushion this really nice weight and really sit nicely. It's not going to be like this. This one I ran out and it has just a tiny bit of sand. It's much more lightweight, so it's kind of, I don't know. I just like them heavy. It's going to sit there. It's not going to get brushed off. And so the bottom of your little pincushion is going to have, I have pincushions everywhere. The bottom of your pincushion is going to have that nice weighted material in there. And then I take the glue stick. Hello, thank you. Then I take the glue stick and I Let me see if I can do this, Maddie. Do you want to point the camera down a little? Can you see this right here? So then I take the glue stick and I just put some glue on that folded seam allowance of my backing piece. And then I take my little white lining piece and hang on, I got too many, not enough fingers. I take that little lining piece and I'm just going to squeeze those two together. Now the front of my pincushion is still open, but essentially what I've done is I've just sealed off the bottom that's got that either sand or the walnut shells in it. And then Patrick stuck a pin in them and they just air dried. And so what that does is it just makes this a lot more manageable when you're trying to get them sewn shut and everything, to just do a little glue and pinch those two. And so now I've got the top between. Now if I open this up again, so my backing and my lining are glued together and that little opening, so I feel pretty secure. And then I'm going to take a little bit of the polyester stuffing, because I don't know, it's just me, and I just feel like pincushions need to be a little bit fluffy like a pillow. So then I take this, and I love this. Actually, you know what's going to work better than this is a pencil. Hang on, I got one right here. Pencil's just going to be a little bit bigger, and I'm just going to take the eraser side, and it's just going to help me. Well, this pencil doesn't have an eraser on it. And so this is going between the lining and your quilt top, right? So the front of your pincushion, and I'm just stuffing. I'm trying to stuff. There we go. Finger. I'm going to just shove it in there, and then I will use my stick to just kind of disperse it. Oh, this is going to be so cute and filled up. And I kind of like to poke some of this fluff into the corners. This is kind of this is a little trick when you make a pillow. Have you ever heard that trick? Where you take a little wad of polyester fill and you poke it up into the corners of your pillow form before after you put the pillow form in, and it just kind of makes those corners stick out. Okay, so now it's a little fluffy on the top, and I'm just going to smooth it out with my finger in here, or you can use the stick. I'm going to whack it, get it kind of evened out. Oh my goodness. Look at that. That is nice and full, nice and heavy, but I got a little bit of fluff on the top, which is super fun. Then you can take that glue stick again and put it right in here. Squeeze these two, squeeze your opening closed, and then you can put a pin in it if you want to. Just let it air dry, for 5 minutes or something, and then you can just sew this with a needle and thread. Now I will say, if you know me, if I can do this on a sewing machine, and so I have done this on my sewing machine with my zipper foot and move my needle over, but it's super awkward. It'd probably turn out way better if you just use a needle and thread. I can hand sew, I promise. I can hand sew. So any questions so far? How's everybody doing here? All right, so there is our cute little finished pincushion. Now if you don't want to do that little lining piece, then you don't need to. Just do the front and back, and it's great. But if you are using the crushed walnuts, they're brown. And if you had a cute little light colored fabric for your backing, it might kind of show through. So in that case, I might just do a little lining anyway, and just go ahead and put one in there, just so it's kind of giving yourself a little extra layer. Pincushions! Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about half square triangles, and
Any
What?
good suggestions on the silica sand? Where to
Ooh,
get
you know, the last time I bought it, it was at the hardware store. I think it was Ace Hardware was the last time I bought it. And like I said, it came in a 10-pound bag, and so I filled up a bunch of Ziplocs with it and gave it to friends. But because I told Patrick, hey, do you think we used half of this bag? And no, we did not. So, but I got more pincushions to make. This is pincushions. I think of course every sewer uses them, so it's a very useful item. But it's also very personal. You can cut up fabrics from a quilt that you just made. If you, anyway, cutting up old clothing. I'm really big on quilts and things. Cutting up clothing. Question for me, Maddie?
Do you shorten your stitch length on the pincushion?
Oh, that's a great question, and the answer is yes. I dialed it down to a 2.0. The other thing that I do that I will tell you is when I'm sewing this seam around the outside of my little pillow, I don't just go to the corner and turn and go down the other way. I go all the way off and back stitch and then start a new one and do a little back stitch so that every corner is just extra reinforced. And I do that all the way around the corners. A little bit tighter stitch length, absolutely. And then of course you're going to do a back stitch at the where you start and stop, a little back stitch just to give you a little bit extra. Let's see. Now, one of the, I think we are going to put a link to, where did that go? Will you give me one of those Pincushion Party handouts? It's on your desk, your roll top desk. I did a little handout called Pincushion Party, and I had attached it, I think the last time I sent out a newsletter before I moved. I think, or no, maybe it was after. Anyway, I think it was December or October. Or 3 years ago. And I made up this little handout, and I have to admit I had not made any of the projects. I just thought these would be cute, and I counted the squares, and they were going to be turning out about 5 or 6 inches, and so I thought these are going to be awesome for pincushions. But I think I'm going to rename this handout for pincushions or mini quilt ideas, because I'm going to show you the blocks that I did. But I think Maddie's going to put the link to this. Is it going to be like up at the top in the comments?
I will pin it.
Okay, she'll pin it to this video, so it'll be the link that you will click on it and be able to download this to your computer and print it off or just save it on your computer. So, but I think I'm going to rename it for when it goes up onto the website, because they turn out a little bit bigger, but I think they turn out so cute. Here's my little, no, this is no borders. This is just pieced. And can you tell that that's a little bee? So this is what I'm going to do with these. I am going to take these little blocks. I mean, I think this would actually be a cute little pincushion, not too big. What happens after you piece the pincushions is the edges kind of roll down, so they're not as big as when they're just a flat block. But I think what I'm going to do with these is I am going to make a little wall hanging. I am going to just put some sashing between these. I think I'm going to do on, if you're new to us, by the way, 10sisters.com is our website. And on our website, we have, in the shop, are lots and lots of patterns that you can download. They're all designed for piecing with EasyPiecing Grid. Of course, you can just piece them regular with squares if you want to. I don't know why you would. We have a little pattern that's a 1-panel spool, so it's 9 by 14. So if I piece that on the 1/2-inch finish, it's going to be 4.5 by 7. So I'm going to make the little scrappy spool as one of my blocks, and so I'll work on this and I'll show it to you guys when I get done. So okay, before I get to half square triangles, I think I might put this in there too. 3 little pineapples in my little, just going to be a little cheery little miniature wall hanging. But I want to show you a couple other things first. Here is my trip around the world that is pieced with the 1/2 inch finished. Now, Maddie and I were laughing last night as I was sewing up some of these pincushions because I know this logically, but what happens is when you sew your seams in one direction, it brings it in and it turns it into this great big huge long triangle or rectangle, and it looks really weird. But when you're piecing with the 1/2 inch finished, it literally shrinks in half. Your 1 inch square turns into a 1/2 inch. And I know that logically, but wait till you see it visually. It's a little bit cuckoo. I mean, my sheet was like this big and that long. So this is the trip around the world from our 10 Sisters book. And, oops, wrong book. And so our 10 Sisters book has a quilt called Trip to Paris, traditional quilt, traditional trip around the world. And I am going to make another one of these, and I'm actually going to make it just a little bit bigger. And I didn't think I would be a big fan of 1/2 inch finished, and I just am. It's really fun. So I want to tell you just a couple of tips about when these get pieced. So for the pincushions, now you know with EasyPiecing Grid, when we're piecing on the foundation, when we piece on that foundation, we're going to sew in one direction, all of our seams, and then we're going to clip between the squares and press our seam allowances going in opposite directions, and then sew the other direction, right? So that's what happened, and here's the back of my little ladybug. And so what's a little bit mind-boggling also is you're doing a full 1/4 inch seam allowance. Don't be tempted to do a tiny seam allowance. You don't need to. If they're easier to sew, you just do your full 1/4 inch seam allowance. But one option, well, what I was going to say is when I did these pincushions, I just left it just like this. It's just regular. I pressed that second seam to one side. I did bring in that moisture. I did bring in that steam because this was fairly bulky. But for the pincushions, I left it just like this because it's a pincushion. Now, if it was something that I was going to quilt.
Did you talk about sewing every other seam when you sew them up instead of every one like you do the regular grid on the 1/2 inch because they're so close together?
What?
When you laid them all out on the Pincushion Party, you skipped.
Oh, I needed to have a sample of that. No, but I will.
Okay.
Thank you. That's actually a good. Look at my cute husband reminding me of sewing tips. I love it. Yes, thank you. I will bring that up. So when I sewed this one, if I was going to quilt it, I would sew the first seams just like regular, clip and press. After I sew the second seam, and I tried this with a rotary cutter, and I trust my scissors a little bit better. I am not trimming, in my mind, I am not trimming down the seam allowance. I'm just cutting off the fold. And so I am just coming with the scissors, and I am trimming the fold off because you don't want to cut all your seam allowance away. And so it's just barely a little shave, but cutting off that bulk of the fold makes this really manageable and pretty easy to quilt. Now this trip around the world, I did stitch in the ditch quilting, but I have another sample that's actually out to a quilt shop right now, and it's quilted right over the top of the seams, and this is what we did. And so just that second seam, we trimmed off the fold, and it still gives us a little bit of seam allowance. And I do it after they're pressed in one direction. For me, it was just easier to press. But either way, but again, I only did this trimming of the second seam if I was going to quilt it. Now, Patrick reminded me of something super important, and that is that when I was laying these out, and I really should have had a sample to show you, but I just sewed them all up. This gives a little bit of an example. This is actually 2 inch finished, and so use this as an example because it's the same concept. So here are all these little pinwheels that were just half square triangles, and I pieced them on the grid all together. So for instance, I did all these little guys here were just pieced on the grid right next to each other, and I filled up the whole panel with pin cushions. Now, after they're all ironed down, if you want, you can just cut them out individually and sew them, but what I did on this and all these others, if it was the same number of squares, right? Same number of squares across. So for instance, my little houses and blocks that were, 5 squares deep, I just I cut that, and then I sewed them all together. I sewed all the seams going in one direction, but between each quilt block I skipped. So I sewed, and then I skipped the line, I sewed, and then skipped. See where that's going to become its own quilt block? I skipped that, and then I did it the other way. I sewed my seam, and then I skipped. So now, and then I did my clipping and pressing, and now when I'm ready, or when they're all sewn, then I can just come in with the rotary cutter or scissors, either way, and I'm just going to cut them apart. But the sewing was done. Now this is a really great demo if you need to just make separate blocks. Now that's 2-inch finished. Oops. That's 2-inch finished, so 2.5-inch squares, and that is a cute pincushion size. So little 4-patch or a little pinwheel. You do a little diamond in a square. So really cute design, and not using the tiny squares. But it's really fun to just lay them all out and just iron and fill up your whole panel. And that's why I just sewed them all up. I was just having way too much fun with ironing and cutting them all out. Sorry. Okay, so one last thing on half square triangles, and we are going to show a few things in our comments sold. And if you're new to us, if you're new to comments sold and you have not registered with us before, in your comment you type in register, and when you type in register, it pops up a little thing that you put your information in, and then we'll talk about what you do next when I show you stuff.
Hey, real quick, on
Yes.
the second seam on the 1/2-inch grid that you trimmed, you don't do that on the large size.
No, I never trim on any of my other sizes. I never trim that off. If it really bugged you, you could, but I've never done it before. And again, it's just if you're going to quilt it. So here's our 2-panel spool done in the 1-inch finish. So just showing you another little sample. The quilt behind me is the Scrappy Garden Path. It's in our Quilts for Kids, and it was done in the 1-inch finished. And I don't know if you've heard my tale on scraps, but it is a myth that you will ever use up your scraps because they reproduce at night. And I think I cut it out enough for a whole nother one of these. I wanted to show you this is on the little handout, and I decided to do it. It was 12 by 12, and I did it in the 1-inch finish, and I'm going to quilt and bind this and just put it up in my sewing room. Does it look like a sewing machine? I hope so. It's a sewing machine if you can't tell. All right.
So what items?
So the items that I want to show you today, the first one are the stencils. And the stencils, I'm going to just quickly demo these stencils for you, because the stencil, remember how I told you that sometimes I'll just cut the half square triangles down for the 1/2-inch, because you need a 1-inch half square triangle. I have shown these stencils before. They are from Quilt in a Flash. I have it goes by the finished size, and I have the 1-inch, 1.5, and 2-inch finished. And I want to show you how these work really quickly. This one is for the 1-inch finished. You use 10-inch squares, which works great if you have those 10-inch stackers or layer cakes. This stencil makes 50 1.5-inch half square triangles. right? And so what I did on my sample, well, I'll show you. Well, you can kind of see. This is already sewn up, but can you see that it's on one of those printed panels that give you the fat quarters or fat eighths, and I just put 2 of them. I just cut it so I have 2 different fabrics on the other side. But the way the stencil works, can you see me right here, Maddie?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to put this on the wrong side, and we are going to lay the stencil down, and we're going to use a Pounce pad. Now the Pounce pad is this nice little pad that's got this chalk in it, and the Pounce is what the chalk is called. It's not what you do with it. If I'm doing several stencils, I do painter's tape and tape my stencil down on one end so it does not shift. And we're going to just do a little bit of a scrub. I'm going to do it, hopefully it'll show up good. I'm going to do a little bit heavy just so you can see the lines. And I love this stencil because what it's marking are your sew lines. You see that? And so it has a little dotted line around the outside. You're going to sew right on the lines that you marked. And then before you do any cutting, you will trim on that dashed line all the way around the outside. And that's what I've done here. Can you see my sew lines okay on this? This is already sewn. I should have done it with black thread or something so you could see. But then you're basically going to do the plus cutting throughout, and then you're going to cut in between those sew lines, and you're going to end up with 50 1.5-inch half square triangles.
Show the blue.
It is a little bit of nuts. And then let's say you have a light fabric that you need to mark, or let's just also say that maybe I don't want to do the whole 10-inch square. I'm going to take, this is the wrong side of my fabric, and I'm just going to put a section of the stencil. Now this Pounce pad is called Barely Blue, and we're going to do some scrubbing. I'm just going to do a little section. Oh, it's too light. I don't think you can even see it. And so I might be able to get away with the white one on here. Oops. But the Barely Blue is for those really light fabrics, like especially white, anything really white. The other thing that you can do is you can actually mark these with a pen. So if you don't use the Pounce pad, you can draw your lines. You just kind of have to hold it still or tape it down. And so then you can just mark with the pen. So the stencils are awesome. They come in the 3 sizes. And so I'm just going to show you that we have these. So our 1-inch finished is sold $125. And the way this works is if it's something that you want to buy or that you just want to go into your cart, right? You're not even committed at this point. If you just want it to go into your cart, in your comment, you type in sold $125. And these are, of course, the finished sizes. So the 1.5-inch finished is sold $126. The 2-inch finished is sold $127. And so these are from Quilt in a Flash. They come with really nice instructions inside, and they're awesome. I love them. I love anything where I'm marking my sew line on a half square triangle.
But they don't have a 1/2-inch finish, right?
No, and so what I did for the 1/2-inch finished is I made the 1.5-inch and I just trimmed them down. And it was way faster than trying to, and it was, the thing I like about it too is they are very accurate. And so it was easier for me to do that, especially if I needed a bunch of them. And so that's, but yeah, in fact, I'm going to have to email her and see what she says about a 1/2-inch finish. Now the Pounce Pads are awesome. It comes with the little container. The little plastic just pops out, and then there's a little baggie inside of the chalk. Now this one that is the white is a miracle pounce that irons away. So it is a white chalk that irons away, which is awesome. And this one that is the white is sold $144, and the Barely Blue is not iron away. If you want the blue to come out, then you need to sponge it off. But again, remember that you're marking your sew line. And so 99% of the time, it's not going to be something that you're even going to need to wash away because it is your sew line. And this one is sold $145. So these are awesome. I want to show you our books real quick. All the books have great ideas for your mini projects. Our 10 Quilts for 10 Sisters is sold $110, and that's me and my sisters. They all say hi today. And no half square triangles in this book, and so some really fun ideas for little projects. And our kids book is sold $111. And it would be fun if something I thought would be fun in the 1 or even the 1/2 inch would be something like a pillow, a cute little pillow or wall hanging instead of a quilt. You know, sometimes I'm speaking for all grandmothers. My first grandchild, who just turned 15, of course, you know, he was the first grandchild, and I think I made that kid like 5 quilts by the time he was 2. And now I'm behind on my quilts. But you know how it is. You're a quilt maker, and you have these darling patterns and these darling babies, and you just go cuckoo. And so making the little wall hangings are a really fun alternative. So lots and lots of patchwork block ideas in the Brothers book. This one is sold $113. And I'm going to just fill up another panel with all these little stars. This, the small sampler, that is the Block Party sampler. There's 25 blocks. Now these blocks are 4 by 4, right? 4 squares by 4 squares. And so, let me find one here. So here, this yellow wasn't a great contrast, but there's a little sawtooth star in the 1 inch finished and just cute. So tons of fun block little pincushion ideas in this. So too much fun. And then our around the block quilts, this is all the quilts in this are designed for our border panels, which, by the way, our next Facebook Live is going to all be about border panels. We're going to be talking about the Boston Commons quilt and row quilts and medallion quilts, and so that's next time. But the around the block quilts is sold $112. Lots of fun pincushion and mini quilt ideas in this book too. Books, I think that was all that I wanted to show you. Maddie's got the link.
It's in the description.
It's in the description of this video. And this, I'm calling it Pincushion Party, but I think I'm gonna change it to Pincushions and Mini Quilt Ideas. And see, there's the little sewing machine that I did is right here. So click on that, and it will download to your computer. And I just gotta show you this basket full of pincushions. There's so many in here. And I might just keep them all. No, I'm going to share. I promise I'm totally going to share these with other people. But I might have to just play with them in a little bit before I do. And I can't wait to stuff this guy. I'm a little obsessed with sheep. Okay, I have one other thing to tell you before I let you go today. That went super fast for me. I don't know if it went fast for you, but I was obviously having way too much fun with these pincushions. I think that's all that I have today.
Next.
Thank you for joining me at 10 Sisters at 2. You guys are awesome. Can't wait to see you again. Have a good day.